The shiny job offer. The heat in Lagos that day was unforgiving. Fola wiped the sweat off her forehead as she stepped off the bus at Ogbanje. The air smelled like roasted corn, engine fumes, and melting tar. It was a Tuesday, but the street buzzed like it was a Saturday market. Hawkers shouted prices. Buses honked endlessly. Fola clutched her worn brown envelope. Inside were 10 printed copies of her CV. She had already walked into 4 shops and 2 offices asking for job opportunities. "We'll call you," they always said, even when she knew they wouldn't. Fola had graduated from secondary school 8 months ago. Since then, her days had been filled with job applications, helping her aunt at her roadside stall, and waiting. Her father was a mechanic. Her mother sold palm oil. They had supported her through school, but money was tight. Today, she wore her cleanest blouse and carried her best smile. But behind her calm face, worry was growing. How much longer would this take? She crossed the road carefully, avoiding okaras that swerved dangerously close. There was one more place she wanted to try. An eatery someone had told her was hiring. Just as she reached the other side, a sleek black car slowed beside her. The windows rolled down smoothly. A woman with bright makeup, expensive jewelry, and flawless skin leaned out. "Excuse me, beautiful girl," she said, her voice smooth like cold Fanta. "Are you looking for a job?" Fola blinked. She looked around, unsure if the woman was speaking to her. "Yes," she said hesitantly. The woman smiled widely. "I can help. You're just the kind of girl we're looking for. Do you model?" Fola shook her head. "No, ma. You should. You've got the look," the woman said. "We're always scouting. I run a modeling agency." Fola felt her heart jump a little. Could this be it? The woman stepped out of the car. She wore heels that clicked confidently against the pavement. Her dress sparkled slightly in the sunlight. People were beginning to glance over. She handed Fola a glossy flyer. "We have a training session this Friday in Lekki," she said. "Bring this flyer. If you impress us, you'll travel Sunabuya, South Africa, even Dubai. But first, you'll need to come with us for the weekend." Fola looked at the flyer. The logo looked professional. There were pictures of models, photo shoots, a hotel pool. It all seemed real. "Do I need a CV?" she asked. The woman laughed. No paperwork. Just come ready to shine. This opportunity is for girls who are smart, beautiful, and ready to move forward in life." She winked. "And don't tell too many people, okay? We like to keep our talents exclusive." Fola nodded slowly, unsure what to say. That night, Fola couldn't sleep. She lay on the mat in her room, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked and rotated slowly. Her parents were asleep in the next room, her siblings snoring softly beside her. The flyer lay beside her pillow, lit faintly by moonlight from the window. It all sounded exciting. Travel, photo shoots, a new life. She imagined herself on a magazine cover, wearing fine clothes, smiling at cameras. Her friends would be amazed. No more walking under the sun with brown envelopes. No more standing beside her auntie's plantain table, smelling oil and smoke. But something about the way the woman said, "Don't tell too many people," bothered her. If it was a good thing, why hide it? And why no paperwork? Why a weekend trip right away? Still, she didn't want to be suspicious. She was tired of waiting, tired of struggling. The next morning, Fola wore her blue t-shirt and jeans and headed out early. She didn't plan to go to the modeling place just yet. She needed to think. Instead, she went to help her Auntie Bisi at her stall near the pedestrian bridge. Auntie sold ripe and unripe plantains, stacked neatly on a wooden table. Fola greeted her and tied on an apron. "You look worried," Auntie Bisi said, handing her a knife to slice peels. Fola hesitated. Then she told her everything. The car, the woman, the flyer, the offer. Auntie Bisi's hands froze. She narrowed her eyes. "And you're sure they didn't ask for ID or guardian contact, and they want you to follow them for the weekend?" Fola nodded. She said no paperwork, just show up. Auntie dropped the knife. Listen to me, Fola. If something looks too easy, it's either fake or dangerous. No good job hides in the dark. Fola looked at her aunt's serious face and felt a strange mix of fear and embarrassment. But what if it's real? She asked, almost whispering. What if this is my only chance to do something big? Auntie Pissy's eyes softened. You want big? Start with small. What's the rush? She untied her wrapper and sat down. My dear, these streets are full of fine promises that lead to shame. A car doesn't make someone trustworthy. A smooth tongue doesn't mean they care. Fola stared at the flyer again. The models looked rich and free. Her aunt's voice cut through her thoughts. Let me tell you something. A girl from our area joined something like this last year. She left for training and came back broken. Nobody knows what happened, but she no longer talked. Her parents said she was used and dumped. Fala's stomach twisted. She didn't want that, but she also didn't want to go back to rejection letters. She sighed. I'll think about it, Auntie. Her aunt nodded. Just promise me, don't go without being sure. That afternoon, Fala did something she hadn't done before. She took a bus to the address on the flyer. It was listed as a studio suite in Lekki. The ride took nearly an hour, but she told herself that if it was real, she'd know once she saw it. As she got down at the bus stop, she realized the building was hidden behind tall gates with no signboard. She stood outside for several minutes. The gate was locked, no intercom, no guard. Just silence. A woman from a neighboring building noticed her hesitation. You dey find person? She asked. Fola showed her the flyer. The woman looked at it and shook her head. You're not the first girl to come with this paper. They don't live here. It's a scam. Fola felt her heart drop. Thank you, she whispered. She turned around and walked slowly back to the bus stop, her legs suddenly feeling heavy. The ride home felt longer. The noise of Lagos was louder than usual. The conductor shouted, the traffic hissed and honked, but Fola barely heard any of it. Her thoughts raced. What if she hadn't checked? What if she had just gone blindly? The woman in the car had seemed so confident, so polished. She didn't look like a liar. And yet, she almost led her straight into danger. Fola squeezed the flyer tightly until it crumpled in her hand. As the bus passed over the bridge, she stared out the window. Somewhere below, people were still rushing, selling, moving, living, but today, she felt like she had paused and narrowly avoided a mistake she wouldn't have been able to reverse. By the time she got home, she dropped the flyer in the trash. Her mum asked, You didn't go out with your CV today? Fola shook her head. No, I went out with my brain. Later that week, Fola sat by her auntie's plantain stall again. The sun was high, but a gentle breeze made the heat bearable. Auntie Bisi handed her a cold sachet of pure water. So, what's your plan now? She asked. Fola smiled faintly. I want to learn tailoring, she said. Her aunt raised an eyebrow. Tailoring? Yes, Fola said, sitting upright. There's a woman not far from here who takes apprentices. She sews uniforms, gowns, even wedding dresses. If I start learning, I can start making money honestly. Maybe even start my own business someday. Her aunt nodded slowly, clearly impressed. That is something. It won't be fast, but it will be yours. Fola felt lighter, more certain. For once, she wasn't chasing glitter. She was planting something real. 3 weeks later, Fola tied her measuring tape around her neck like a medal. She stood inside Madame Aisha's small but lively shop, watching as colorful fabrics were cut and stitched with precision. The sound of sewing machines filled the room like music. Fola had already learned how to thread needles, hem skirts, and draw patterns. Every evening, her fingers ached, but her heart felt full. Madame Aisha was strict but fair, and the other girls treated Fola like a sister. She had even opened an Instagram account to post her learning progress. Her photos weren't filtered or flashy, but they were real. You're doing well, Madame Aisha told her one day. If you stay focused, you'll go far. Fola smiled. She didn't need a fake modeling flyer to feel seen anymore. She had chosen the slow road, and it was already leading somewhere better. It wasn't always easy. Some mornings Fola woke up tired and tempted to sleep in. Her hands would be sore from the day before, and her back would ache from leaning over cutting tables. There were times when the power went out, or machines broke down, and the shop fell into frustrating silence. On those days, Fola sometimes remembered the woman in the car, the makeup, the promises, the glossy flyer. Would life have been easier if she had followed her? But that thought never lasted long. She remembered the locked gates, the neighbor's warning, the chill in her chest when she realized she had almost been tricked. She knew girls who had vanished into things they couldn't talk about. Fola would take tired feet and honest work over shiny lies any day. She wiped sweat from her brow, reached for the scissors, and reminded herself, real success is built, not bought. One Saturday morning, Fola's cousin Ijoma came to visit. Ijoma was a year older and always dressed in the latest trends. She had a large following on Instagram, and her page was full of glamorous photos in fancy restaurants and malls. "You sewing now?" she asked, raising an eyebrow as she looked at Fola's chalk-dusted apron. Fola nodded, smiling. "I love it." Ijoma laughed softly. "But look at me," she said, flipping her braids. "I'm making money, promoting brands. Makeup, hair, clothes. You should try it." Fola looked at her cousin's photos. Everything looked perfect. But something felt off. Ijoma always looked stunning, but rarely smiled with her eyes. "Maybe," Fola said. "But I think I'll stick with this. At least I know where my money's coming from." Ijoma shrugged and went back to scrolling. Fola folded her fabric, her hands steady. She didn't need to chase applause. She was busy building her piece. One evening, Madame Aisha gave Fola a special task, cutting and assembling a customer's birthday dress. It was her first solo project. Fola was nervous but excited. She measured the fabric twice, marked the design carefully, and stayed late to complete it. The next morning, the customer arrived, tried it on, and smiled. "This is beautiful," the woman said. "Who made it?" Fola's chest swelled with pride. "I did, Ma." "How long have you been sewing?" "Just a few months," the customer nodded. "You'll go far." As she left, she turned to Madame Aisha and said, "Please tag me in her Instagram post. I'd love to support her." That night, Fola posted the photo, a simple caption that read, "First dress, first real smile, learning in Lagos." The likes were few, but genuine. One comment read, "Keep going, you've got something real," and that meant more than filters ever could. Soon, Fola's small page began to grow, not with fake followers or showy posts, but with videos of her sewing, before and after shots of outfits, and short captions about what she was learning. People liked her honesty. They commented things like, "Inspiring," and "This reminds me of my mom's tailor." Fola didn't dance for attention or pose in unrealistic settings. She was just herself, and people connected with that. One day, a boutique owner DM'd her asking if she could design 6 simple dresses for resale. "I want something handmade and authentic," the message said. Fola showed it to Madame Aisha, who smiled proudly. "You see, when your roots are deep, the tree will grow strong." Fola accepted the job, not because she was chasing fame, but because she was ready. She worked late into the night, needle in hand, purpose in her heart. This was no shortcut. It was the long road. But it was real. Months passed, and Fola had saved enough to buy her own sewing machine, a second-hand Singer, but it worked just fine. Her parents were amazed. "You did this from sewing?" her father asked. Fola nodded. "Every kobo," her mother beamed. "God bless your hands, my child." Fola cleared a corner of their compound and set up a small workspace. It wasn't much, just a table, a chair, her machine, and a plastic mirror, but it was hers. She started sewing for neighbors, schoolgirls, even church members. Every stitch built her confidence. Every satisfied customer was a step forward. One day, as she ironed a completed dress, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Are you available to make uniforms for a local private school? We need 40. Fola stared at the screen, her heart racing. She looked around at her humble setup and smiled. The girl who once chased shiny offers now had something truly golden. Fola sat still for a moment, rereading the message about the school uniform order. 40 uniforms. It was the biggest request she had ever received. She had sewn a few dresses, fixed torn hems, and even made matching outfits for some mothers and daughters. But this was business, serious work. She wiped her palms on her wrapper and took a deep breath. She didn't have enough fabric yet. She didn't have an industrial machine. But she had skill, and she had her name, and right now, that was enough. She replied to the message, "Yes, I'm available. Can we meet to discuss designs and deadlines?" Within an hour, she had set up a meeting with the school's admin team. That night, she didn't sleep much. Her mind danced with measurements, budget estimates, and delivery plans. Fear whispered, "You're not ready." But another voice, a stronger one, replied, "You've come too far to doubt now." The next morning, Fola arrived at the school in a clean blouse and neatly pressed jeans. Her notepad was filled with sketches and price breakdowns. The school administrator, a middle-aged woman with sharp glasses and a clipboard, looked impressed. "Your designs are neat. Do you work alone?" Fola nodded. "For now, Ma. We usually hire larger shops, but I like your energy," the woman said. "Let's start with 20. If they're good, we'll order the rest." Fola nodded calmly, but inside she was buzzing with excitement. She took all the necessary measurements, discussed the delivery timeline, and left the office walking taller than ever. On the bus home, she stared out the window, imagining 20 children wearing uniforms she had made. She didn't have a showroom. She didn't have a shiny ad. But she had earned this moment, stitch by stitch. Back at her sewing corner, Fola got to work. She bought rolls of navy munal fabric and white collars, carefully budgeting every naira. She borrowed a second sewing machine from Madame Asia for the weekend. Her younger brother helped cut thread. Her neighbor helped iron. It became a family effort. The room was hot, and the power kept going off, but Fola pressed on. There were moments she wanted to cry, when a collar didn't sit right, or when a customer came to collect a dress early and she had to pause her uniform work. But she didn't stop. Every time doubt crept in, she'd remember the face of that woman in the car, promising fast fame. She would whisper to herself, "This is better. This is mine. This is real." Slowly, each uniform took shape, each stitch a step away from false glitter. 2 weeks later, Fola delivered the first 20 uniforms to the school. The principal personally inspected the seams, the buttons, and the stitching. Then she called in 2 students to try them on. The shirts fit perfectly. The trousers and skirts hung straight. One of the children twirled happily in the new uniform. "They look good," the principal said, nodding. "Very good." Fola smiled, bowing slightly. "Thank you, Ma. We'll be placing the second order tomorrow," the woman added. "Also, would you consider leading a workshop to train some of our older students in basic sewing?" Fola's mouth fell open slightly. "I'd be honored, Ma." That night, as she walked home carrying her now light fabric bag, she passed a new model billboard ad near the bus stop. The woman in the photo looked flawless. The caption read, "Glow up fast." Fola smiled. "No," she thought. "I'd rather grow slow and stay." Word spread. The local barber shop started asking for uniform aprons. A small restaurant nearby wanted matching headscarves for their staff. Fola wrote everything down in a notebook titled Orders. She had to manage her time well. Some days she worked from sunrise to late night. But there was joy in the rhythm. She began saving again, this time for a small generator. Her followers on Instagram grew steadily. Some sent her DMs just to say they were proud. "You inspire me," one message read. "Please keep showing your process." One afternoon, while measuring a customer's waist, Fola heard a familiar voice. It was Ijuma, her cousin. She was passing by, this time with tired eyes and a faded wig. They hugged. Ijoma whispered, "You were right." Fola didn't ask for details. She just hugged tighter. Some stories are better left unspoken, but the lesson, it shone brighter than gold. Fola's workspace began to look like a real studio. She put up a handmade sign, "Fola stitches custom tailoring and uniforms." It was painted by a local artist friend who exchanged it for 2 free shirts. Her father added a small shelf for thread and zippers. Her mother gave her an old fan to cool the room. Everything was modest, but it was hers. One day, a university student named Tenny walked in. She had seen Fola's page online. "I've a dinner coming up," she said. "Can you design a gown that's simple but elegant?" Fola's heart raced. It would be her first evening gown. "Yes," she said, smiling. Tenny showed her a sketch. They discussed fabric, price, and fitting dates. After the girl left, Fola danced a little in the corner of her workshop. She was growing, one thread at a time. As she pinned fabric for the gown, Fola thought about how far she had come. A few months ago, she had been unsure, easily swayed by a stranger's promise. Now, she had a client trusting her with something special. But with new attention came new pressure. Some friends asked why she wasn't branding more. "You should do big shoots, hire a photographer, post more glam stuff," one said. Fola smiled and thanked them, but she knew what she wanted. "I'd rather let the work speak," she replied. That night, she scrolled through her feed and saw influencers flashing luxury bags, promoting sugar-coated dreams. A few DMs even offered partnerships that seemed too good to be true. One message read, "You're pretty, let me sponsor you privately. No strings, just vibes." Fola stared at the message, then deleted it. She had seen what those vibes cost people. She had chosen better. On the morning of the gown delivery, Fola woke up early. She ironed every seam twice and checked every stitch. Tenny arrived with her roommate. The dress was a smooth shade of emerald green, with a modest slit and flowing sleeves. When she tried it on, her face lit up. "It's perfect," she said. Her roommate gasped. "You made this?" "Yes," Fola said, "from scratch." Tenny took photos, tagged Fola's page, and left a glowing review. That evening, as the pictures spread, DMs started flooding in. "Can you make mine? How much for something similar?" Fola took a deep breath. It was happening, but she reminded herself, every yes must be delivered with honesty. She replied to each message, spacing out bookings and never overpromising. Her hands could only sew so fast, but her integrity, that was limitless. Saturdays became her busiest days. Customers picked up orders, new clients stopped by. Children played near her setup, fascinated by the sound of the sewing machine. One little girl watched quietly every week. One day, Fola gave her some leftover fabric to practice with. "What's your name?" she asked. "Tolu," the girl whispered. "Do you want to learn how to sew?" Tolu nodded eagerly. Fola smiled. "Come every Saturday after chores. I'll teach you a little at a time." That small gesture brought her back to her own beginning. Curious, eager, unsure. She realized she was becoming what Auntie Bisi had been to her, a guiding voice, a safe space. And that made her success feel even more real, not because of money or followers, but because she was now pouring back into someone else. One evening while closing up, Fola looked up at the orange Lego sky. Cars zoomed past, vendors packed their goods, and voices echoed through the street. She sat quietly and exhaled deeply. Her hands were sore, her shoulders stiff, but her spirit was light. She remembered the flyer, the perfect faces, the empty promise. What if she had said yes that day? What if she had stepped into that car chasing fast glory? She might be somewhere else entirely, maybe not even safe, but now she had something worth far more than any shiny offer: purpose. She packed up her tools, folded her fabrics, and whispered, "Thank you," not to anyone in particular, but to life, to her aunt, to her courage. She turned off the light and headed home, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring. It wasn't long before a small local radio station invited Fola to speak on a youth-focused weekend show. The segment was called Rising Voices. At first, she hesitated. "Me? Talk on radio?" she asked the presenter, who had discovered her page through a customer. "Of course," he said. "Your story can help other young girls. You turned down a dangerous shortcut and built something with your hands." Fola agreed, nervous but proud. On the Saturday morning of the interview, she wore her favorite Ankara top and tucked her measuring tape in her bag like a badge of honor. Sitting in the studio, she told her story: the job hunt, the flashy woman in the car, the temptation, and the decision to learn a real skill. The host nodded thoughtfully. "What would you say to someone facing that same choice now?" Fola thought for a moment and said, "Shiny things fade, but what you build with truth lasts." After the interview aired, her phone buzzed with messages. Some were from strangers. One girl wrote, "I was about to meet someone who promised me travel modeling. Your story stopped me." Another said, "I dropped out and felt useless. Now I want to start learning the skill. Thank you for your courage." Fola read the messages slowly, each one a reminder of why truth matters. She screenshot a few and saved them in a folder called Real Gold. Her aunt cried when she heard the replay of the radio interview. "You've become a voice," she said. "And you didn't even need a microphone to start. You used your life." That day, Fola added a quote to her workshop wall, written on cardboard with bold marker. "Not all that glitters is gold, but every honest seed grows." It became her daily reminder, and soon, her brand tagline. The workshop got busier. Fola hired her first assistant, a quiet girl named BC who had just finished secondary school. "I'll pay you small for now and teach you everything I know," Fola said. BC smiled shyly. "I just want to learn and do something meaningful," she replied. Fola saw herself in BC's eyes. Every time she taught her how to measure, cut, or finish a hem, she remembered her early days. She also gave BC a journal. "Write everything down, your ideas, your goals, even your mistakes. It will help you grow." BC nodded, carefully writing her name on the first page. Customers loved the new energy. Orders came in steadily. School uniforms, casual outfits, birthday dresses, even baby clothes. Fola never turned flashy, but her reputation began to shine. She was known not just for her work, but for how she treated people, with patience, respect, and care. That, she realized, was the true sparkle. One Monday morning, Fola received an email that made her gasp. It was from a youth entrepreneurship group sponsored by an international NGO. They had found her page through a repost and wanted to feature her in their monthly newsletter. "We spotlight African youth building with integrity and impact," it read. "We believe your story fits that perfectly." Fola blinked several times. She wasn't used to international attention. They asked her for photos of her workspace, a brief write-up of her journey, and any message she'd like to share with other young people across the continent. She thought carefully and wrote, "Dear dreamer, sometimes the world will offer you shortcuts dressed like blessings. Pause. Ask questions. Look deeper, because real gold doesn't shout. It grows silently like you will, one stitch at a time." She attached her photos and hit send. Heartful. The feature went live a week later, and the responses poured in. Youth from Kenya, Ghana, and South Africa sent her messages of encouragement. Some even asked her how they could start learning tailoring in their own towns. Fola felt humbled. She replied to each message carefully, sometimes offering tips, other times just cheering them on. The NGO sent her a small grant to expand her workshop, enough to buy a new cutting table, better lighting, and a second-hand electric machine. She couldn't believe it. She walked into the equipment store, her feet dusty, her account balance honest, and told the shopkeeper, "I'm here to grow my dream." When she brought the new tools home, her parents stood at the door watching her set everything up. Her father smiled quietly. Her mother touched her cheek. "And Fola? She stood in the center of her workshop, surrounded by hard-earned progress, and whispered, "This is gold." With her new equipment in place, Fola began planning weekend sessions to train young girls in her neighborhood. She printed a simple poster: free beginner tailoring class, Saturdays, girls only. Learn a skill, build a future. She placed it at the local church, the mosque, and the community bulletin board. On the first Saturday, 7 girls showed up. Some were shy, others excited. Fola welcomed them with warm smiles and handed each a piece of scrap fabric, a needle, and thread. "We're starting with basics," she said, "but basics are the foundation of everything." The girls listened closely, surprised that something so ordinary could feel empowering. As they practiced stitches, Fola shared her story, not with pity, but with purpose. "I almost chased something shiny," she told them, "but I stayed where the truth was, and that's why I'm still standing." One girl raised her hand. "So, you didn't need to travel to be great," Fola shook her head. "Greatness isn't in where you go, it's in what you grow." Later that week, a well-dressed man visited her workshop. He claimed to represent a local influencer brand that promoted young entrepreneurs. "We love your story," he said. "We'd like to sponsor you, but we also need you to post 3 times a week, wearing our clothes and using our caption guideline. It'll make you go viral." Fola looked through the contract. The terms were vague. She noticed that they'd have partial rights to her content. One line read, "We reserve the right to shape brand messaging." That didn't sit well. "Will I still be allowed to speak about girls' safety and honest work?" she asked. The man chuckled. "We'd prefer a more inspirational tone. Less of the hard stuff. People want to feel good." Fola politely declined. "I don't pose to make people feel good. I pose to make them think." The man left disappointed. Fola remained unmoved. The rejection made her question herself for a moment. The deal could have brought in more attention, more money, more visibility, but at what cost? She sat quietly that night, scrolling through her early posts. Simple dresses, smiling customers, small beginnings. She read the comments again, the one from the girl who didn't take the suspicious job offer, the boy who wanted to learn sewing because of her page, the older woman who said Fola reminded her of her younger self. This was her audience, not people chasing filters, but people chasing hope. She put her phone down and reached for her journal. She wrote, "If your voice becomes an echo of someone else's script, what good is the platform?" The next day, she returned to her workbench with fresh conviction. She had learned a deeper lesson now. Not all glitter comes from strangers. Sometimes, it's your own integrity that shines. By mid-year, Fola's name had become known not just in her neighborhood, but across nearby communities. Schools recommended her for uniforms, brides to be trusted her with their dresses, parents asked her to mentor their daughters. One afternoon, she was invited to speak at a local girls' secondary school. Standing in front of a classroom filled with curious young eyes, she felt nervous but grateful. She held up her old measuring tape and said, "This taught me more than any fake promise ever could." She shared her journey, the temptation of fast money, the power of asking questions, and the beauty of building something real. When she finished, one student raised her hand and asked, "Miss Fola, what if someone already made a mistake?" Fola stepped closer and said gently, "Then they get to make a choice today. Mistakes are heavy, but they don't have to be permanent. Growth is always available." After the talk, several girls approached her. Some asked about tailoring. Others simply said, "Thank you." One girl, no older than 16, stood quietly holding a crumpled flyer. Fola recognized the design instantly. It looked just like the one the modeling woman had given her months ago. "Someone gave me this last week," the girl whispered. "Said it was for a weekend shoot. They offered to pick me up at night." Fola's eyes filled with calm urgency. "Promise me you won't go. Can I show you something instead?" She took the girl to her workshop, showed her the machines, the fabric, the work in progress. "This may not look glamorous, but it's safe, and it's yours when you learn it." The girl nodded slowly. "I didn't know there were choices like this," Fola smiled. "There are always choices. You just have to see through the shine." The girl with the flyer, whose name was Anita, began showing up every Saturday. She was quiet, always early, and asked thoughtful questions. Fola took her under her wing, just as Auntie Bisi once had. Together they hemmed skirts, learned to measure with precision, and stitched small accessories. "You're patient," Anita said one day. "You don't shout like other teachers." Fola smiled. "I shout with my work. If I teach you with fear, you'll only learn how to obey. But if I teach you with kindness, you'll learn how to create." Word spread, and soon the Saturday classes had doubled. Fola printed handouts. She saved money to buy more chairs. Her parents helped organize snacks for the girls. It was becoming more than a workshop. It was a safe space, and Fola knew that was what had been missing the day the woman in the car found her. A place to feel seen, a place that didn't offer gold, but taught you how to mine your own. One Sunday after church, Fola ran into two former classmates, girls she hadn't seen since secondary school. They were dressed in designer knockoffs and posed for selfies near a parked car. "Fola?" one of them said, clearly surprised. "You look different." Fola smiled. "I feel different." They asked what she'd been up to. When she said she was running a growing tailoring business and teaching girls to sew, one girl raised an eyebrow. "So you're still doing that sewing thing? Isn't that for women who don't make it?" Fola didn't flinch. "I used to think that," she said honestly. "But then I realized I don't want to fake a life for pictures. I want to build one I don't have to run from." The girls exchanged glances. One laughed uncomfortably. The other looked away. But Fola didn't feel small. She felt steady. She had nothing to prove, only something to protect. That night, as Fola prepped orders for the week, she reflected on the conversation. Years ago, those classmates had intimidated her. She'd wanted their approval, their style, their ease. But today, their energy felt hollow. She thought about how many girls were still trapped in that chase of fake lifestyles, of online applause, of curated perfection, and how close she had come to that trap herself. She pulled out her journal and wrote, "Gold doesn't rush. It forms under pressure, over time, and when it shines, it doesn't need to beg for attention." The next morning, she included that message on a printed card that came with every customer order. "A small reminder," she told Bisi. "It on with coats, but maybe they'll leave with courage too." Her work was no longer just about fabric. It was a message, a seed, a statement, and she planned to keep planting it, one stitch at a time. Fola was invited to a small business panel at a community youth event. She was the youngest speaker on the lineup. The others had formal offices, digital teams, and high-praise services. When it was her turn, she stood with quiet confidence. "I don't have a big brand," she began. "I don't have an AC in my shop or a driver to drop me here, but I have trust. My clients trust that when I say it'll be ready, it will be. They trust that I'll give my best, even when I'm tired. And that trust is better than gold." The hall went quiet. A few clapped slowly, then the whole room joined in. Afterward, several parents approached her about apprenticeships for their daughters. "We thought tailoring was dead," one said, "but you've made it look dignified again." Fola smiled and replied, "It never died. We just stopped honoring it." On her way home from the event, Fola stopped by her old bus stop, the same one where the woman in the black car had first spoken to her. The memory felt distant, like a different lifetime. She stood there quietly, watching the traffic, the rush, the blur of strangers. Then she noticed another girl, standing in the same spot she had stood months ago. Brown envelope in hand, nervous eyes, dreaming, hoping. Fola walked up and greeted her. "You job hunting?" The girl nodded. Fola reached into her bag and handed her a flyer. This time it wasn't for a modeling agency, it was for her free Saturday training class. Here, she said, it's not quick money, but it's a real start. The girl looked at it, confused but thankful. And just like that, the cycle of light continued, passed hand to hand, one truth at a time. By the next month, Fola's workshop had trained over 30 girls in rotation. Some came every Saturday, others came when they could. She didn't charge them, just come with thread and the will to learn, she always said. Parents from nearby communities began calling. A pastor even invited her to speak during Youth Sunday. Still, Fola stayed humble. She didn't see herself as a leader, only a learner who was passing on the light. One afternoon, her old school principal invited her back to speak at an alumni event. When she stepped into the school compound, dressed in a gown she had sewn herself, some teachers didn't even recognize her. "Fola the quiet girl?" one asked, stunned. "Yes, ma," she replied. "But I found my voice. In fabric, in faith, and in freedom." The principal smiled. Sometimes the quietest students become the strongest examples. Fola walked past her old classroom. The desks were smaller than she remembered. The windows hadn't changed, but she had. She stood at the front of the room as the new students filed in. "Good morning," she said gently. "My name is Fola. I'm a tailor, a trainer, and a dreamer, just like many of you." She talked about failure, fear, and choosing the slow path. She didn't sugarcoat it. "There were days I almost gave up, days I felt invisible. But hard work doesn't shout, it speaks in results." One girl raised her hand. "What if people laugh at your dreams?" Fola smiled softly. "Let them laugh. Let them watch. Then let them clap when you rise. But don't shrink just to fit their version of success." After the session, a teacher told her, "You've said what many of us wish we could say." Fola replied, "Sometimes we just need a mirror, not a microphone." As the year moved on, Fola's sewing school slowly began taking shape. A local organization that supported girls in skill development offered her a small grant to expand. With their help, she built a bigger space behind her house. It wasn't fancy, but it had space for 6 sewing machines, plastic chairs, shelves for tools, and a fan in every corner. The community helped paint the walls, hang posters, and clean the floor. They called it Fola's room. The name stuck. Children who walked past pointed excitedly and said, "That's where Auntie Fola teaches." A former student of hers offered to come back and help teach the new girls. "You showed me I could do more," she said. Fola smiled and hugged her. She never intended to build a movement. She just wanted to avoid a trap. But now, she had built a bridge for others to safely cross. One evening, Fola sat alone in the newly finished space. The sun was setting, and the room glowed in soft orange light. She looked at the chalkboard where she had written, "Every stitch matters." It wasn't just about sewing anymore. It was about life. Every choice, every pause, every brave no to something fake, every brave yes to something real. They all mattered. She remembered how close she had come to taking that weekend trip, thinking it was a golden ticket. But if she had, there would be no Fola's room, no trained girls, no growing business. Just a story untold. She breathed deeply and whispered, "Thank you again." Not just to God, but to the voice inside her that had whispered, "Wait." That voice saved her, and now she was teaching others to listen to theirs too. Not long after, a journalist from a women's magazine visited her for an interview. "We've heard about the tailoring program, the Saturday classes, and your story. It's powerful." Fola agreed to speak, as long as the article focused on truth, not fame. The interview was honest, warm, and real. When the story published, the headline read, "The Girl Who Said No to Glitter and Found Gold in Giving." The magazine sold out in 3 days. People began sharing the article online. Radio hosts read excerpts. NGOs reached out. But through all the buzz, Fola remained grounded. She continued to sew, to teach, and to water the life she had built from honesty. The spotlight had found her, but she wasn't chasing it. She was too busy building her roots. With the media attention came new challenges. Fola started receiving offers from brands, invitations to attend influencer events, and even requests to collaborate on social campaigns. Some were genuine, others were clearly looking to ride on her story's popularity. Her email inbox grew fuller each week. One request offered to repackage her brand with stylists and publicists. Another suggested filming a documentary about her life, but with dramatized scenes and scripted lines. Fola thanked each of them respectfully, but stayed cautious. She remembered what it felt like to almost lose herself in a lie. "If your story needs exaggeration," she said to BC one day, "then maybe it's not your real story anymore." BC nodded slowly, learning not just to sew, but to stand. Fola sat that evening and reviewed her mission: teach, uplift, build safely, and stay true. That was her compass, and she had no intention of trading it for flash. Still, she couldn't ignore that her platform now had power. Girls listened, parents trusted her. Her DMs were filled with confessions, some from teenagers almost trapped in the same shiny web she'd escaped. Fola realized she couldn't carry it alone. So she formed a small team. 3 of her earliest students helped organize classes. Her cousin Ijoma, now rebuilding her own life, offered to handle social media honestly. Together, they created content about self-worth, personal safety, and skill building. "We won't just talk about sewing," Ijoma said. "We'll talk about seeing through the fake." Fola agreed. They launched a weekly series called Real, Not Rushed, sharing stories of growth, struggle, and quiet victories. It became more than content, it became a mirror for many who were tired of pretending online. And Fola, she finally understood that sometimes the most powerful influence isn't loud, it's consistent. One day, Fola got a phone call from someone unexpected. The woman who once stopped her at the bus stop in a shiny car. Her voice was as smooth as ever, but this time she sounded unsure. "I saw your name in a magazine," she said. "Didn't expect you to do all this." Fola's heart beat faster. "How did you get my number?" she asked. "Instagram bio," the woman replied. "I just wanted to say, I misjudged you. You looked desperate that day. I thought you'd jump." There was silence. Then Fola said calmly, "I was desperate, but I wasn't blind." The woman chuckled, but it sounded hollow. "You're smart. You made the right choice. I hope the girls who meet me now have your kind of voice." Before Fola could reply, the line went dead. She sat in silence. That voice once tempted her, but now it only reminded her of how far she'd come. Later that night, Fola shared the moment with BC and Ijoma. They sat on the workshop floor, surrounded by fabrics, fans whirring overhead. "Do you think people like her can change?" BC asked. Fola thought for a moment. "I don't know," she said, "but I know that some people don't want to trap others because they're evil. Sometimes they're trapped themselves. It's a cycle. Pain teaches pain. That's why we teach something else here." Ijoma added quietly, "We teach dignity." Fola smiled. That was the word she had been searching for all this time. Not wealth, not fame, not even success. Dignity. It's what she had gained the day she said no to the shine and yes to her own worth. "Let's write it down," she said. And so they did. On the workshop wall, next to the quote about gold, they wrote in bold letters, "We teach dignity." That month marked 1 full year since Fola turned away from the modeling scam and chose tailoring instead. She hosted a small anniversary gathering. Nothing flashy, just music, food, and testimonies. Girls shared what the Saturday class meant to them. Parents expressed gratitude. Her parents gave a speech, fighting back tears. Auntie BC held her hand tightly, whispering, "You're everything we prayed for." Fola stood before them all, in a dress she designed, and said, "1 year ago, I nearly gave away my future for something shiny, but I chose patience, purpose, and truth. And you, every one of you, proved that I chose right." The crowd clapped, some cried, and others stood in silence, absorbing her words. That night, as the lights dimmed and the last guest left, Fola sat by her sewing machine, ran her hand over the table, and smiled. Her journey wasn't over, but it was golden. The days after the anniversary celebration were quiet but purposeful. Fola returned to her sewing, her training sessions, and her now weekly community talks. The glow of media attention faded a little, and she welcomed it. She had never wanted fame. What she valued was consistency, and it was in those quieter moments, when she stitched late into the night or reviewed designs with her students, that the real impact grew. One Monday, a mother brought her teenage daughter to the workshop. She was almost taken by one of those fake job recruiters, the woman said, her voice shaking. "We saw your interview and I told her, let's go and see the girl who said no." Fola welcomed them in. As the girl sat down, her arms folded tightly, Fola didn't pressure her. Instead, she handed her a fabric scrap and said, "Just try to make one line of stitches. That's all." The girl hesitated, then took the needle. The first stitch was shaky, the next was better. Hope, Fola realized, often starts with the smallest thread. As time went on, Fola began journaling her journey in detail, less for publicity and more as a record of grace. She filled page after page with the names of girls she'd taught, quotes from their conversations, and reflections on days she wanted to quit but didn't. She even wrote letters to her past self. In one entry she penned, "Dear Fola, I'm proud you paused. That one hesitation saved your future." She planned to one day turn the journals into a book, not for profit, but to gift it to every girl who walked into her training room. "So they know they're not alone," she said to BC one evening. "So they can see that strong doesn't mean perfect. It just means brave enough to question what feels wrong." The written words became therapy, a way to remind herself that growth wasn't loud or instant. It was honest and earned. Then came a day that tested her deeply. One of her brightest trainees, a 15-year-old named Zainab, stopped showing up. Fola asked around, only to learn that Zainab had taken a job in another town, offered by a fashion agent who promised her fast money and travel. Fola's heart sank. She had seen this before. She reached out, but Zainab didn't respond. Later, Zainab returned. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders slouched. She didn't say much, just walked into the workshop and sat down. "I thought it would be different," she whispered. "They lied. I ran." Fola didn't scold her. She simply handed her a bottle of water, a needle, and fabric. "Welcome back," she said. "Your seat never left." Zainab cried silently while stitching. That day, every girl in the room stitched quietly too. No one asked questions. No one looked away. They all understood. The world makes shiny traps. But the room they were in, that was where real healing happened. Zainab's story reminded Fola of something she had almost forgotten, how easy it is to fall, and how rare it is to have a soft place to land. That evening, Fola updated the quote wall in the workshop. Underneath, "We teach dignity," she wrote in chalk. "Here, you're allowed to come back." The next week, Zainab asked if she could share her story during one of the weekend classes. She stood before the new girls, voice trembling but honest, and told them about the promises that turned into pressure, the compliments that turned into commands, and the fear that stayed, even after she escaped. "Don't be ashamed to ask questions," she said. "Real opportunities don't silence your voice, they give it more power." The room was still. Fola looked on, tears quietly pooling in her eyes. Zainab had come back not just to learn, but to lead, and that, more than anything, proved that the mission was working. As the rainy season rolled in, business slowed a little, but Fola didn't mind. She used the time to reorganize the workshop, plan new lessons, and write more in her journal. One wet afternoon, she stood under the zinc roof, watching raindrops slide down the window. She thought about the path she had chosen. It was never easy. It had fewer shortcuts, fewer big moments, and more silent victories. But it was full of meaning, full of moments like Zainab's return, Anita's growth, and the quiet strength of a girl stitching her future, one line at a time. She reached for a marker and wrote a new phrase on the mirror in the room. You are not behind. You are building. Every girl who looked into that mirror, from then on, saw not just their reflection, but a reminder. Fola knew now her life was no longer just a lesson. It had become a lifeline. As the weeks passed, Fola began receiving letters, handwritten ones, from some of the girls who had graduated from her Saturday classes. One wrote, "Thank you for saving me before I made a mistake." Another said, "You taught me that my hands are powerful." Fola kept them all in a small box labeled Grace. On quiet nights, she opened it to remind herself why she started. One letter, though, stood out. It came from a girl who had never spoken much in class. It simply read, "You never knew this, but the day you hugged Zainab was the day I believed I could return from my own mess too. Thank you." Fola folded the letter and held it to her chest. She didn't need a trophy, a billboard, or viral fame. These letters were her reward, proof that quiet impact could echo louder than fame ever could. One morning, a woman came to the workshop with her son. He had just finished secondary school and was unsure of his future. "Do you teach boys?" the mother asked, half hopeful. Fola paused, then smiled. "If he's ready to learn, I'm ready to teach." The young man joined the next class, sitting quietly beside the girls. He listened, learned, and eventually taught others. Fola realized then that the message wasn't just for girls. It was for anyone at risk of being tricked, rushed, or silenced. "We don't just teach sewing," she told her students. "We teach you to trust your gut, to build something real, and to return if you ever get lost." The boys who joined felt welcome. The girls grew stronger. The workshop evolved. But its soul stayed the same: honesty, dignity, and safe growth, stitch by stitch. 1 year and 6 months after that car had pulled up beside her, Fola stood outside her old secondary school again, this time as a keynote speaker at a graduation ceremony. The girls wore bright uniforms. The boys laughed in rows. Parents filled the hall with applause. As Fola took the mic, she held nothing but her old brown envelope in her hand. "This was me," she said, lifting it. "I carried this through Lagos, begging for work. Then someone offered me gold, with no questions asked. I almost said yes. The crowd went still, but I paused. I asked myself, if it's truly gold, why is it hiding? That pause saved my life." She shared her journey, not with pride, but with purpose. "Not all that glitters is gold," she said gently, "but what you build with your hands, patiently, honestly, that will shine forever." As the ceremony ended, students and parents rushed to thank her. A few girls cried. Others asked for selfies. One teacher whispered, "You're raising more than tailors. You're raising leaders." Fola smiled and thought of Auntie Bisi, of her first measuring tape, of the cracked mirror in her first workspace. So much had changed, yet her reason remained the same. That evening, she returned home to find the workshop quiet and warm. She sat at her machine, touched the pedal with her foot, and listened to the steady hum. Not long ago, she wanted a glamorous life, fast results, big recognition. Now she had something deeper: peace. Peace that came from choosing right when wrong seemed easier. Peace that came from lighting candles instead of chasing spotlights. Her hands moved. Her heart was full. And so Fola's story came full circle. Not with fanfare, but with fulfillment. The girl who once stood at a bus stop tempted by a woman in a shiny car had become a woman of her own making. Her gold didn't glitter. It glowed. Quietly, steadily. She had built a space where others could rise without rushing, fail without fear, and grow without guilt. The workshop walls held wisdom. The girls who came through its doors carried seeds. And Fola, now more mentor than apprentice, continued her quiet revolution. One stitch, one student, one saved future at a time. Because in a world full of shine and noise, her life whispered a deeper truth. Real gold isn't loud. It lasts.